We may be getting closer to a deal on the debt ceiling, but it hasn't happened yet, and time is running out. This year's tax collections were lower than expected. That means the government is quickly running out of the spare change it's been using to keep the lights on, which in turn means X date could come even sooner. How much sooner? Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen says it could be June 1st, less than 2 weeks from now. Economic uncertainty means you have to keep up with what's happening. Make sure you subscribe and we'll keep you in the know. According to Secretary Yellen, if the debt ceiling isn't raised in time and the government is forced to default, then, in her words, financial and economic chaos would ensue. Moody's Analytics says it would be comparable to the worst of the global financial crisis. In their estimation, the consequences could include a peak to trough decline in GDP of 4%, more than 7 million jobs lost, an unemployment rate surpassing 8%, and a collapse in financial markets so large that $10 trillion in household net worth is wiped away. But as grim as that sounds, some say it's nothing compared to what could eventually happen if the government fails to bring its fiscal irresponsibility under control once and for all. One of those sounding that alarm is legendary hedge fund manager Stanley Druckenmiller. In a speech delivered recently at the University of Southern California, Druckenmiller lamented that the fiscal recklessness of the last decade has been like watching a horror movie unfold. He said later that he hopes that government doesn't default. However, he added, all this focus on the debt ceiling instead of the future fiscal issue is like sitting on the beach at Santa Monica, worrying about whether a 30-foot wave will damage the pier when you know there's a 200-foot tsunami just 10 miles out. And in the case of this tsunami, the earthquake that triggered it is the government's insistence to keep spending money it simply doesn't have. According to the most recent edition of the Congressional Budget Office's Budget and Economic Outlook, the annual budget deficit will average $2 trillion from 2024 through 2033. For perspective, the annual budget deficit had never even reached $2 trillion until 2020. It seems as though a $2 trillion per year deficit will become standard. What also seems standard now is the boundless growth of the national debt. According to the CBO, the portion of the federal debt held by the public will rise from 98% of GDP this year to 118% of GDP in 2033. Most of that increase can be attributed to the growth of both interest costs on the debt and mandatory spending, including Social Security and Medicare. Looking further down the road, the CBO says that in the next 3 decades, the public's portion of the federal debt will be nearly twice the size of the economy, 195% of GDP. By practically all assessments, these numbers mean the nation's traveling an unsustainable fiscal path. Even the Treasury Department is saying America's current fiscal future is unsustainable. In a report published just last month, the Treasury said the following: a sustainable fiscal policy is defined as one where the debt-to-GDP ratio is stable or declining over the long term. Current policy is not sustainable. The message is clear. Raising the debt ceiling today may contain the most urgent potential fiscal crisis, but continuing to raise the debt ceiling and adding trillions of dollars to the debt pile, we may eventually face a crisis anyway. That's why I suggest you take the time to learn more about what's really going on in the economy by attending our exclusive one-on-one web conference at AugustaPreciousMetals.com/webconference.